You either absolutely love Breath of the Wild, or you don't find the appeal and yearn for the older Zelda titles. While clearly the game has been beyond successful compared to the rest of the series, it went for a new direction that brought a ton of new players into the series, but also alienated some of its old school players. Though I only say some, since for me, a fan of the series from when I was a child, I absolutely loved the direction Nintendo went for with this game, and it quickly became my favorite within the entire series. But what changed so much in Breath of the Wild that makes it so much different than the rest of the series? Well, sorta everything. While you do still play as Link, in a world known as Hyrule, to save its land from Ganon and unite together with its princess, Zelda, the gameplay itself is like no other Zelda game. Zelda games have been known for their dungeons, a key objective that gives the player a new item to solve the rest of that dungeon and open up new areas that weren't accessible beforehand, requiring the player to backtrack to places they couldn't solve, only now with an item that will do the trick. While it had an open world to explore, the world acted as a hub area that connected everything together, from the towns to the dungeons to even small caves and other secrets. But the core gameplay always was to reach the next dungeon, find its key item, and complete it. And this has always been the formula of gameplay since the very first Zelda game, up until Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild went for a completely new direction, getting rid of the steady progression system and just opening up the entire world for the player right after the tutorial. All you need is the 4 runes obtained for your Sheikah Slate. This becomes your puzzle solving item for every puzzle you come across, allowing you to choose any area to explore right off the bat, even letting the player head straight to the final boss if they choose to do so. No key items are needed for anything. The Sheikah Slate is all Link needs in order to solve every puzzle in his path, letting the player choose how they wanted to tackle things. And this freedom in choosing your own path completely changed the main objective for its gameplay that the series was known for. As with every game, there will always be a main objective for you to do again and again, being the main gameplay mechanic for that game. Whether it's collecting a star in a Mario game, battling someone in a Pokemon game, racing through a new track in a racing game, reaching the end of a level in a platformer, lighting a new bonfire in a Dark Souls game, having a turn-based battle in an RPG game, knocking out a player in a fighting game, shooting a 10-year-old in a match in an FPS game, delivering an Amazon package in a Strand-type game, or with how older Zelda games were with taking on a new dungeon in a Zelda game. Regardless, it's the activity you repeatedly find yourself doing depending on the game. This is what is known as the gameplay loop, the main objective in a game that the player is required to do again and again in order to progress. And depending on the game and genre, it varies. But regardless, each and every game will have a certain gameplay loop that you have to do again and again until you reach the end of the game. So with the Zelda series, that has always been its dungeons, having to complete each one in order to reach the next one and reach the end of the game. But in Breath of the Wild, that changed from the big puzzle-filled dungeons we know the series for, to now the short and simple, but still puzzling, Sheikah Shrines. While the game does have the 4 divine beasts, which somewhat imitate the classic dungeons the series is known for, they are far shorter and have no unique item needed to complete it. And overall, in terms of your total gameplay, they won't take much time out of it, and are general side objectives that can be outright ignored. The real meat and potatoes of this game are the 120 Sheikah Shrines found throughout Hyrule. As an open-world sandbox game this time around, the main objective is to explore it for its secrets. So the 120 shrines are the main thing you spend time on when playing this game, as there are 120 collectible orbs that give the player more stamina or hearts, making traversing its world even easier. Now wait a second, 120 missions? Where have I seen that before? Where the player is given a sandbox and has the freedom to roam around looking for secrets and objectives at their will. Yes, Super Mario has been known for something pretty similar. While you aren't given a world as massive as Hyrule, you are given smaller worlds that act as a hub area in order to find the many secrets throughout it. From the 120 stars in Mario 64 to Galaxy, to the 120 shine sprites found in Sunshine. Even the 900 Korok seeds somewhat remind me of the 900 plus moons throughout Odyssey, with those collectibles not being as significant because of the amount you find. It's really looking like Breath of the Wild borrowed from the Mario playbook on collectibles, with 120 more meaningful collectibles and 900 not so meaningful. Regardless, Breath of the Wild managed to mash both of those concepts into one. In general, the direction the game went for was similar to how the 3D Mario platformers carried out its gameplay, giving the player a level to explore at their will while filling up that world with secrets to find. And the Sheikah Shrines and Korok Seeds are a great example of that. Instead of stars or moons, you are given spirit orbs, or Korok poop. And instead of platforming, you solve puzzles. Still somewhat staying to the roots the series is known for, with puzzles being a heavy part of its gameplay, but also heavily changing the way you tackled it, with breaking them up into hundreds of different miniature tasks. Doing it this way gave the player smaller victories with each shrine or Korok seed, similar to how you felt with each star you found throughout a Mario game. So instead of committing to a whole dungeon to get that victory at the end, you had many smaller victories with each shrine or Korok seed you found. It made the game far more accessible to players who didn't want to commit to full-on dungeons, and made coming back to the game feel much easier to do so, as you didn't have to try to figure out what you did or didn't do, you just went for another new objective that was already marked on your map. This really changed the gameplay style from that traditional Zelda formula to more of the Mario formula. You completed things the way you wanted to, in the order you wanted to. No longer did you have to follow the same way of puzzle solving like previous games were. You weren't limited to just one playstyle, as your Sheikah Slate gave you the option to choose multiple different ways in solving each puzzle, instead of needing that one key item to do so. And because of that, it made each playthrough feel unique, kinda like a Mario game. And it's actually crazy how similar these two series have been, especially with their latest releases. A mostly silent protagonist that sometimes has a companion aid them on their journey in order to defeat the same reoccurring bad guy and save the princess while at it. These are the two titans of Nintendo, who have evolved to the point where they no longer need to wear their same iconic outfits, and now are given a wardrobe of new attire as they have reached a status that would have you recognize them no matter what they wore. Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey seem to have taken the biggest steps in evolution compared to their previous titles. And because of it, they now share even more similarities than before. Both collectathon masterpieces, with one focusing on puzzle solving and the other focusing on platforming. While this may have upset some fans who wanted more of a traditional experience, I really believe it opened up the series to many players who didn't really like playing Zelda games because of how limited the gameplay used to be. No longer is it about following a set path with set items. It's a sandbox that lets the player choose how they want to do things. While Breath of the Wild at its core is still a Zelda game, the game has had major changes in how you tackle the core gameplay that completely changes it from the rest of the series. And whether for the best or for the worst, I'm really glad Nintendo was willing to take that risk, as it really seems to have paid off. Now, does that mean we shouldn't have any newer Zelda titles moving forward that aren't like its classics? Of course not, but it's never a bad thing to change things up within the series, even if it borrows from the most popular gaming series of all time. Nintendo has now made a Zelda title as open to any player as a Mario title would be, and this isn't a bad thing. Most likely, Breath of the Wild 2 will continue to add to this formula, as the Hyrule this time around is meant to be an open playground. But I still hope Nintendo eventually goes back to the classics and makes a new Zelda game with old school fans in mind. Regardless, Breath of the Wild shows that innovation to a long-lasting series can be a good thing, even if it breaks away from its roots, as the heart of the series will always be there, making for a fresh take on a beloved franchise. And I personally welcome these changes the series went for and can't wait for what the future holds in store. But what do you guys think about Breath of the Wild and its changes compared to the rest of the series? Is it a bad thing for Nintendo to borrow inspiration from their biggest franchise for their second biggest? Please let me know in the comments below and leave a like if you enjoyed. And don't forget to please subscribe for more content like this and to help support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching. I've been ZeldaMaster, and I'll see you all in the next one.